Yo Joe. For every hero in G.I. Joe, a real American hero, there was a villain equally iconic, equally unforgettable, and sometimes even more entertaining. Cobra wasn't just a faceless terrorist organization, it was packed with larger-than-life villains who had their own agendas, backstories, and reasons for wanting world domination. Today, we're ranking the 10 most dangerous Cobra villains from the classic G.I. Joe universe. These are the bad guys who made the show legendary, sold millions of toys, and proved that sometimes the villains steal the show. Before we infiltrate Cobra's ranks, subscribe to Pure Nostalgia and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next mission into 80s and 90s pop culture. Villain number 10, Zartan, the Master of Disguise. Zartan was Cobra's ultimate infiltration specialist, a mercenary who could change his appearance to look like anyone. With his chameleon-like skin that changed color based on his environment and his mastery of disguise, Zartan made every mission unpredictable. What made Zartan dangerous wasn't just his abilities, it was his unpredictability. He wasn't loyal to Cobra Commander or anyone else. He worked for whoever paid him, which meant he could turn on his employers at any moment. He led the Dreadnoks, a gang of ruthless bikers who caused chaos wherever they went. Zartan's toy came with masks that could be swapped out, making him one of the most interactive figures in the line. Kids could recreate his disguises and create endless storylines where nobody knew who to trust. That paranoia factor made Zartan a villain who was as much about psychological warfare as physical combat. Villain number 9, Dr. Mindbender, the Mad Scientist. Every great villain organization needs a mad scientist, and Cobra had Dr. Mindbender. This former orthodontist turned evil genius was responsible for some of Cobra's most insane technological schemes, from brainwashing devices to genetic experiments. Mindbender was the guy who created Serpentor by combining the DNA of history's greatest conquerors. He built mind control devices, developed advanced robotics, and constantly pushed the boundaries of what was scientifically possible in the G.I. Joe universe. His purple costume, bare chest, and cape made him look more like a villain from a horror movie than a military show. What made Mindbender memorable was his total lack of ethics. He'd experiment on anyone, including Cobra's own troops, if it meant advancing his research. He represented the dangerous intersection of genius and madness, proving that the most dangerous weapons aren't always guns and missiles. Sometimes they're the ideas of brilliant, twisted minds.
Villain number 8, Major Bludd, the Mercenary Poet. Major Bludd was Cobra's most professional soldier for hire, a battle-hardened mercenary who fought for money, not ideology. What made him stand out was his unexpected sophistication. He spoke in rhymes and poetry, giving him an intellectual edge that most Cobra operatives lacked. Bludd was dangerous because he was competent. Unlike Cobra Commander, who often stumbled into defeat through his own incompetence, or other Cobra agents who relied on gimmicks, Bludd was a legitimate military threat. He knew tactics, weapons, and battlefield strategy. He'd fought in conflicts around the world before joining Cobra. His Australian accent and poetic dialogue made him one of the most quotable villains in the series. He wasn't cartoonishly evil, he was a professional doing a job, which somehow made him more menacing. Kids who owned his action figure knew they had a villain who could actually challenge the Joes on equal footing. Villain number 7, Storm Shadow, the Rogue Ninja. Storm Shadow was Cobra's answer to Snake Eyes, a ninja warrior with incredible skill, speed, and lethal precision. Dressed in white instead of black, Storm Shadow was visually striking and became one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. What made Storm Shadow complex was his backstory. He wasn't just evil for evil's sake. He had history with Snake Eyes. They trained together under the same ninja master, but tragedy and betrayal drove them apart. Storm Shadow joined Cobra seeking revenge, making him a villain with depth and motivation beyond simple world domination. As the series evolved, Storm Shadow's character became even more nuanced, eventually revealing that he'd infiltrated Cobra for his own purposes. This moral ambiguity made him more than just a bad guy. He was an anti-hero whose loyalty was always in question. His rivalry with Snake Eyes became one of the show's most compelling ongoing storylines. Villain number 6, Tomax and Xamot, the Crimson Twins. Tomax and Xamot were identical twins who ran Cobra's legitimate business operations through their company, Extensive Enterprises. These weren't just thugs or soldiers, they were sophisticated corporate villains who funded Cobra's operations through white-collar crime and shady business deals. What made the Crimson Twins genuinely creepy was their telepathic connection. They could finish each other's sentences, feel each other's pain, and coordinate their actions with perfect synchronization. This gave them an almost supernatural edge in combat and strategy. Their matching red uniforms and cold, calculating personalities made them feel like villains from a spy thriller rather than a typical action cartoon. They represented Cobra's evolution from a terrorist organization into a global corporate empire, showing that the greatest threats don't always come from armies. Sometimes they come from boardrooms.
Villain number 5, Firefly, the Saboteur. Firefly was Cobra's premier saboteur and demolitions expert, a silent, efficient operative who specialized in blowing things up and disappearing without a trace. His gray urban camouflage uniform made him look like a ghost, and his methods were terrifyingly effective. Unlike louder, more theatrical Cobra villains, Firefly worked in silence. He didn't monologue or gloat. He planted explosives, destroyed G.I. Joe bases and equipment, and vanished before anyone knew he was there. This made him one of Cobra's most effective operatives, despite having relatively little dialogue or screen time. Firefly's toy came with a backpack full of tiny bombs, letting kids recreate his sabotage missions. His character proved that sometimes the scariest villains aren't the ones who announce their plans, they're the ones who strike without warning and disappear into the night. Villain number 4, Serpentor, the Genetic Emperor. Serpentor was Cobra's attempt to create the perfect leader by combining the DNA of history's greatest military commanders, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, and others. The result was an arrogant, power-hungry emperor who believed he was destined to conquer the world. What made Serpentor dangerous was his competence. Unlike Cobra Commander, who often failed due to incompetence, Serpentor actually knew military strategy. He was ruthless, decisive, and effective. He immediately challenged Cobra Commander for leadership and won, taking control of Cobra through sheer force of will. His golden armor, snake-themed helmet, and flying chariot made him visually spectacular. His battle cry, "This I command," became instantly iconic. Serpentor represented Cobra at its most dangerous, organized, competent, and led by someone who actually knew how to win battles. He showed what Cobra could accomplish with the right leader. Villain number 3, the Baroness, Intelligence and Seduction. The Baroness was Cobra's intelligence officer, a brilliant strategist, master manipulator, and femme fatale who proved that brains could be just as dangerous as brawn. With her trademark black leather uniform, glasses, and cold European accent, she became one of the most iconic female villains in 80s animation. What made the Baroness formidable was her intellect. She gathered intelligence, planned operations, and manipulated both allies and enemies with equal skill. She wasn't just eye candy or a damsel, she was often the smartest person in the room, regardless of which side you were on. Her romantic relationship with Destro added another layer to her character. She wasn't just a villain doing evil for its own sake, she had motivations, relationships, and depth. The Baroness proved that female villains could be complex, dangerous, and memorable
without being reduced to stereotypes.
Villain number 2, Destro, the arms dealer with honor. Destro was Cobra's weapons supplier and one of its most dangerous operatives. Unlike other Cobra villains who were motivated by power or chaos, Destro was a businessman. He provided weapons to anyone who could pay, making war profitable regardless of who won. What separated Destro from typical villains was his code of honor. He was ruthless and calculating, but he kept his word, respected worthy opponents, and conducted himself with dignity. His distinctive chrome-plated mask, worn by all men in his family as a mark of ancestral pride, made him instantly recognizable. Destro's deep voice, Scottish accent, and sophisticated demeanor made him feel more like a James Bond villain than a cartoon bad guy. He challenged Cobra Commander's leadership not through tantrums, but through competence and strategy. His relationship with the Baroness added emotional depth rarely seen in 80s action cartoons. Destro proved that the most dangerous villains are the ones who combine intelligence, resources, and principle. Villain number 1, Cobra Commander, the face of evil. There could only be one choice for the number 1 spot: Cobra Commander himself, the founder and leader of Cobra, the man behind the chrome face mask and blue hood, the villain whose shrill voice became the sound of 80s cartoon villainy. Cobra Commander was compelling precisely because he was flawed. He was cowardly, prone to tantrums, quick to blame others for his failures, and constantly undermined by his own subordinates. Yet somehow he always survived. He rebuilt Cobra from nothing multiple times, escaped impossible situations, and maintained control through sheer force of personality. His look was pure intimidation. The featureless chrome mask or the hooded uniform made him faceless, mysterious, and terrifying. His voice, provided by Chris Latta, was both menacing and absurd, creating a villain who could be genuinely threatening one moment and pathetically comedic the next. What made Cobra Commander the ultimate G.I. Joe villain was his staying power. He defined what Cobra was. Every scheme, every plot, every attack came back to his vision of world domination. He wasn't the strongest, smartest, or most competent villain, but he was the most essential. Without Cobra Commander, there is no Cobra. Without Cobra, there are no Joes. Cobra's roster of villains was one of the richest in 80s animation history, from mad scientists and master ninjas to ruthless businessmen and incompetent dictators. These bad guys gave the Joes worthy opponents and gave fans characters they loved to hate. Now it's your turn. Which Cobra villain was your favorite? Did we get the ranking right, or should someone else be at the top? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us which villain you wanted to add to your collection. If this deep dive into Cobra's ranks brought back memories, subscribe to Pure Nostalgia, smash that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next mission into the cartoons and toys that made the 80s and 90s unforgettable. And remember, knowing is half the battle.